Yo, what's poppin', my people? It's your boy Crooks the Great, back at you guys with another banger of a UFC 5 video. That's gonna take some getting used to, doesn't it? UFC 5 video. But yes, we are here now, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm gonna be going over 2 new features in UFC 5 that will help you at day one be a high level striker in UFC 5. So as you guys can see here, we're gonna be watching just a little clip of an interview that this guy right here, Curtis Calhoun, did with 3 of the UFC 5 game developers. We have Jazz here, we have Ramen Bassi, and we have Nate McDonald. And he was asking him about a plethora of things in the game, how the online career mode is going to work, how, the graphics are going to work. He asked him about the Frostbite engine. And then we came to doctor stoppages, you guys see right here. So we're going to be listening to a couple things and then how they're going to work and how you can use them to be a high level striker day one. And hopefully you guys get a better understanding of what is going to be taking place in UFC 5. So I am going to leave the link to this interview. So if you guys want to watch the full thing, it'll be in the description of this video. I don't own any rights to this video, so I don't want to get copyrighted or anything like that. All copyrights go to MMA News right here. And shout out to this guy for asking all the right questions, man. All the right questions he asked. So here we go. Let's watch the clip that I am most interested in that we're going to be breaking down in the video.
To a certain region of the face, it's going to cause a cut or swelling, just like it would in real life. And there's going to be certain strikes that have cut properties to them, right? So like an elbow. We know that elbows cut very often, so elbows in our game will have the same properties. This type of damage can lead to vision penalties or breathing penalties, and if you aggravate them enough, it could lead to a doctor stoppage. But we also have like cut resistance attributes as well in the game that we've added this year. So a fighter like a Nick Diaz would get cut very easily off of many strikes, but a fighter like Anderson Silva would have a high cut resistance attribute because he doesn't get cut very often in this fight. So
all right, so the first thing that we're going to be talking about, and one of the new features that's going to be in UFC 5, is cut resistancy, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this is going to make you pay attention to more of the stats category. I don't know if this is actually going to be in the statistical breakdown of the fighters, like what we have in UFC 4, but I'm assuming the way that he's describing it, you're going to be able to see it that way. And if that's the case, you're going to want to use fighters that don't get cut a lot in real life. So guys like Jose Aldo doesn't get cut a lot in real life. Anderson, who he just said doesn't get cut a lot. Guys that you don't really see take a lot of damage in real life and that get cut that often, you're going to see a lot of those guys being used in ranked championships, as well as guys that you're going to want to use straight off the rip in ranked championships. So that might mean that you might see a lot less of Nick Diaz, obviously, like he just said, because Nick has a lot of scar tissue on his face, so he opens up pretty easily. But more so, even with Nate Diaz opens up a lot and opens up very, very easily. Guys like Wanderlei Silva get cut a lot. Guys that get frequently cut a lot, it's going to be easier to get doctor stoppages on them. So you're going to want to be careful when you're using those brawl out fighters like a Diego Sanchez or something like that. Guys that get cut, that are able to get cut very frequently, that's going to make it a little bit easier for you to get stopped. So you do want to know that going into UFC 5. So that way, if you match up with somebody that you're like, okay, I know this for a fact, you're going up against a Nate Diaz and you're Conor McGregor or your Islam or something like that, you get him on the ground, you're going to want to be throwing nothing but elbows because you're going to open up for sure a cut on one side of his face. You know what I mean? So that's something that is newer to the game that I really hope you guys put a point of emphasis on when you're basing your game plans against certain opponents. And you want a game plan for that when you're deciding what fighters you want to use as well. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is going to be really, really important. So we're going to go ahead and keep watching the clip. This guy Ramen was dropping. They were dropping excellent tips in this video. And keep in mind, guys, we did not get this during UFC 4 and UFC 3. The developers were not coming out and talking about openly before the game, talking about things like this. So shout out to these guys for going, and they did multiple interviews on UFC 5. So shout out to them. All right, let's keep going.
Much like our damage system, there's going to be no luck involved in doctor stoppages. It's all going to be based very real on the damage that's happening to you in the fight. So you have the opportunity to change your game plan. If you have a big cut over your eye, you know that your vision's compromised. You know that rounded strikes on the same side are going to be, your block is going to come up a bit slower because that's the impact of vision penalties. So you know.
All right, so there's the second. He's not even going into this. Like this is a very important thing that I don't even think he noticed that he really should have put a point of emphasis on is vision strikes. Now, if you take too much damage on one side of your face, it is going to make your block slower. So you won't really have to. Not only I don't really know how the block breaking is going to work or how the block is going to work, but this is going to make blocking very, very difficult if you're eating a high amount of damage, which is super important if you are trying to be a really good high level striker in UFC 5. The fact that if you're targeting one area, right, you just keep targeting it, you know that anytime you throw a strike to that side, their block is just going to be a tad bit late. It can really, really make for some very good times as the aggressor in that situation. So that's a very, very important thing to understand going into UFC 5 is that if you take too much damage or you dish out a lot of damage on one side, it will affect your block timing. So if you're not, I would assume it's going to make it to where you have to preemptively know that your opponent is going to strike you in a certain area after a certain amount of damage on one side. But even then, that's real. It's something that I would have never even thought of for UFC 4. So shout out to these guys in UFC for putting this in UFC 5. It really is sophisticated. And the more sophisticated it gets like this, the better it is, because it eliminates luck, like he said. There's not going to be any luck in the damage that you're landing on somebody. And that's what I love to see, because UFC 4, you can get kind of lucky, right? You can get wobbled, you can get knocked down, you can eat 200 strikes to 50, and if you're able to land one counter, you get lucky with a lucky shot, a lucky overhand, you can end the fight. But in this game, that's going to be more and more less likely than in UFC 4, which is great. People aren't going to be taking an absorbent amount of damage like they do in UFC 4. And if they do, it's going to slow that block down so you don't have to keep, just jabbing your way at the block, trying to block break somebody. It's going to make it a lot easier to get finishes. So take this information right here, the second tip, and really, really understand it and try to implement it in your striking style in UFC 5. And like I believe it was Nate was saying at the beginning of this interview, so hopefully you guys go and watch this whole interview. This is a game that you're not going to want to get hit. You're going to want to be as defensively sound in UFC 5 as possible, because it seems like the more damage you take in this game, the worse you're going to be. As we already know, they've kind of already broken down. For those of you guys that haven't heard anything or watched anything on UFC 5, you are going to be able to break your opponent's nose in this game, and that's going to affect long-term stamina as well. That's going to affect how much recovery you have, as well as a whole bunch of other things. But to hear this in terms of damage affecting your block is an absolutely beautiful thing. So something that you need to keep in mind, and the more that you can kind of implement this into your game, and the more you understand this heading into UFC 5, the better off you're really going to be. But that's it for the video, guys. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to slap that subscribe button as well as slap that like button if you're new to the channel. I do post MMA content on this channel daily. We're doing a lot of UFC 4 stuff, obviously, because UFC 4 is out. But I'm going to be releasing more and more information about UFC 5, as well as when the gameplay trailer comes out. I'm going to be breaking that down as well. So if you enjoy anything MMA game related, this is the place for you. But until the next video, guys, take it easy, be safe, enjoy the rest of your guys' day, afternoon, evening, depending on where you guys are watching this from. And I will see you guys in the next video.